Yeah. Hello and welcome to our podcast, I guess. It's a video podcast.
Video podcast. From Manila in Philippines.
Yeah. We first met when we were in Brisbane, Australia.
Yes. Actually, was it Brisbane? Yes, it was Brisbane, yes.
Yeah, at the Z-Day event there. That's where you got this shirt, and I...
Zeitgeist Movement shirt, which is quite faded at this moment in time.
I was presenting at Z-Day and you came along and filmed and vlogged and stuff, which was cool.
Yes. That was back in 2017?
2017.
2017, yeah.
I now have sort of assigned the last few years according to what the Z-Day was.
Yes.
So I remember because I spent a good week and a half preparing for that Z-Day. It was incredibly intense. We were getting 4 or 5 hours sleep a night, and just
building up to it.
Building up to it, and it was I was so tired and exhausted when I gave that presentation at Z-Day.
I think leading up to it, there was a few events that you held, like
Every night we were putting something on. There were pre-Z-Day events and that sort of stuff, and then anyway, it was big 2-day event. It was the biggest Z-Day I think that there has been, because we had two areas. There was a main presentation and there's a workshop space, and that for 2 days. So I definitely felt the difference between that event and then last year's event in Frankfurt, Germany, which was a little bit small, a little bit easier to actually organise.
Oh well, you did a marvellous job anyway putting on that one in Australia. It was marvellous over 2 days. Peter Joseph coming and a lot of other members from around the world. So it was a good job by everyone from the Australian movement to put that together. And a group of us from New Zealand and the Zeitgeist Movement New Zealand came over to support. And
it was really good. Definitely felt the New Zealand presence. And then when I went to Auckland a few weeks later and presented at the New Zealand
Z-Day, which we held about, I think, 2 or 3 weeks after the Australian Z-Day.
So I managed to recover a bit.
You did, and you did a great presentation. I believe it was the Price to Zero presentation you did.
Yeah, so they ended up doing it 3 times at 3 Z-Days. So Brisbane, in Auckland, and then in Frankfurt. And I feel like the Frankfurt one was the best. I focused much more on giving a good presentation.
And you would have included a lot more updated information that you've accumulated throughout your period of time to present a more better presentation.
And then at the end of last year I went, PJ didn't like the audio recordings at Frankfurt. There was an issue where we mixed different channels and streams and stuff, and a video camera with a delay and everything. We got it mixed into the primary channel. So unfortunately we couldn't use the audio from that, and I had to go and re-record everything. And that's the video that you just
saw. I saw that video. You've done a really good presentation there, which we can talk a little bit more in depth shortly. So getting back to the Z-Day in Australia, there was a number of talks spread over two days. Peter Joseph,
PJ, Eleanor Goldfield, Jason Lord, Frankie, Federico Castano, the whole range of people.
It was a great turnout as well. So there was a lot of the public that came along, and people with some open minds, and a lot of questions through the question and answer session, which was really informative. I think the major talk or topic there in those question and answers was about the universal basic income.
A lot of people seem to like the idea of UBI, income, or UBS, Universal Basic Services. Which, in some ways, the RBE is like a really enhanced version of that.
Yeah.
Be the equivalent to, if it's income wise, be equivalent of being getting $1 million a year.
Yes.
But without all of the likely issues of just inflation and everything else. Like the power purchasing equivalent, I guess, or just the main thing is access abundance and having what you need to thrive. Always available there.
Excellent, yeah. And then after that, we went to New Zealand for the Z-Day there. We had a really good turnout there, and you done another presentation.
Yeah.
And I think we actually had a politician come and talk, and that got a bit fiery with some of the public, and so it was a pretty like varied kind of.
We definitely had it arranged. I loved catching up with Richard Osmondson.
Yes,
there.
Richard Osmondson. Yes, and he also had a talk at the Australian Z-Day as well.
Yeah, Money Free Party. Yeah. And there was what did you give a presentation?
Yeah, I gave a presentation as well, but it was just about a resource-based economy and what it was fundamentally about, just for those people that came to the Z-Day and didn't know much about what is the Zeitgeist Movement, what is a resource-based economic system. So I gave just a simple overview of that, and
for the viewers, there is an expectation you understand what at least the resource-based economy concept is, or something in our discussions. But do you want to give a quick little discussion of what it is?
Yeah, we can give we can see.
I'll fill in anything. I want to hear your perspective, because I know what mine is.
Well, so a resource-based economic model, from what I've researched and talk about, is basically it's like a open source system where people have access to resources without the use of money, but also utilizing the scientific method for social concern. So the resources are managed more intelligently, and the Earth's resources become the common heritage of all the Earth's people in a way. So it's used in a more sustainable way, totally different from how we're utilizing it now in the current paradigm, or the current system, monetary system, capitalism, whatever you want to call it. So in its basic forms, that's what it is: access, abundance. You have access to resources. That's what we really need, essentially, for our life. Those essential needs: shelter, food, water, clean air, and a whole bunch of other things. So and once we get past that initial stage of, I call it, basic needs in survival mode, we can focus on meaningful things in life. Whether it's exploring, or more research and development, or creativity, doing our passions, more family time, things that are more or less stressful for us. Totally different to what we have now in this current system, where we're working in a stressful environment. A lot of diseases are coming from that, and stress and anxiety levels, mental health problems. It's just
we're just wasting so many resources. You just look at mobile phone networks. They compete,
yes,
so that you can only connect to one or the other, and you have to pay lots of money. But if they collaborated, then you can connect to whichever one was available there. And I guess the way I think of the IB is there's a big challenge ahead of us, and that is that humans by default will level out at about 11 billion people. We've already gone over peak birth rate, so we're not actually producing as many people anymore. And all of the stats, everything shows, all right, 11, maybe 12 billion people, that's fine. But the question is, how do we have 11 billion people living, thriving, amazing lives within the carrying capacity of the Earth?
Of the Earth, exactly.
And how do we also be a multi-planetary species and everything else? So the resource-based economy concept, the actual term itself, most people go, oh, you're using resources instead of money. It's like, no, what we're doing is focusing on being able to to effectively utilize resources in a way that right now we extract stuff out, process it, we use it, and we throw it away. And it's just this linear model, and we just see...
It's inefficient how we're using it now.
Yeah, we see nature as this infinite source of resources, but in reality, it's drastically shrinking away. We're already going over, we need 2 Earths just to sustain us at the moment.
And we're going to need plenty more if we don't change, and if we keep going along this path. So
exactly. But if we go for access abundance instead of, say, ownership, then instead of everyone having to own a DVD library or even vacuum cleaners and stuff, I use the vacuum cleaner model.
Yes, I saw that in your talk, the vacuum cleaner model, where you share the use of that, so there's least production of it, but people using that in a more sustainable way, which is what we need. And me being a traveler, I had accumulated a lot of things before I left. I had a house full of furniture and whatnot, and then I sold everything. The day I sold everything, I felt a lot of weight off my shoulders, and then I could travel around without having to worry about my things back home. And even when you shift from one place to another, it's just such a burden moving with property and things, when all you really need is just access to those things.
Exactly. Hammers and drills and stuff. Drills are a great example. The standard drill gets used maybe 14 minutes in its entire lifetime. And the way we've got it at the moment, most people have to go buy an electric drill for being able to do a couple of little holes. Well, you don't actually want a drill, you want a hole in the wall. And
I bought a new one for my mum before I left my travels, and now it's just sitting in her shed rusting away, and she only used it for one time to drill a hole. So
exactly. But if you could easily borrow, use, share, so what you'd want is you actually want an industrial grade, long lasting drill that gets used by 50, 100 plus people. So instead of there being 50 drills, now there's one, and it'll last twice as long as those 50 drills.
Exactly. Now we have things that are created through planned obsolescence, and
people want more. The corporations are profit driven. They need more money. They need to sell more things, and planned and perceived obsolescence.
So it's quite ludicrous actually, when all you need is just that for its purpose. And that's primarily it, and not having this burden of property accumulating and waste at the same time. So getting back to the RBE, having access to those resources will do away with a lot of that wastage and those sorts of things that are now predominantly in this current system that we are in.
I did the same as you. I traveled a lot last year, and I put everything into storage, and I was paying a whole lot of money for a storage unit. Went back to Australia when I knew I was going to move here to Manila, and back home in Australia, I went, all right, I sold everything off. I kept 2 boxes of stuff, 30 terabytes of videos and footage and whatever else that I couldn't.
Some of the essentials, the tool essentials.
But it was amazing just how much I got rid of.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the way I put it was, it's so cheap that you will pay me more.
Yeah.
And people were. They're like, oh no, that's not worth $2. Here, have $5, $10. And it was worth $100 plus.
Yeah.
And but I feel really good and remove that burden.
I did too. I felt a real burden, and I moved to Vietnam. That's where I'm established at the moment, in Vietnam, and working on a few projects there. But having the access to resources there, so I moved into an apartment which was fully furnished and everything so I didn't have to bring in my washing machine or any of those things, or even a jug to boil for a tea or whatever. It was all there to use, and so having access just to those resources is amazing. Then I can move on to somewhere else if I need be. So I think a resource-based economy will work in a similar way like that. We have access to those resources, and you're not having to carry them around, and this notion of ownership.
I sold a washing machine in Australia. We don't have one. We don't even have hot water in here. Like, you've been here. We go and boil the jug, the kettle. We pour it into a bucket, and you just pour water over yourself. And I mean, we could go and get a hot water system installed, but we're moving from here, and there's other issues where, like, we were given a small fridge, but we need a bigger fridge. But that small fridge, because it's owned by the landlord, we just have to sit here. It's wasting space, not being used by anyone, and it just sits around. And it's because of property. Whereas if it's access abundance, and that was the main culture, then people, here's a fridge. Other people need a fridge. Here you go.
Exactly, that's it. The access abundance thing. So. Yeah, so getting back to the Zeitgeist Movement, resource-based economy, and your talks on
the transition,
price to zero. I've got a couple of questions. For your talk.
Definitely interested.
I'll grab them here for you. So, what is the price to zero?
So, the price of zero is my term for a way we could transition. The idea is that if we keep business as usual, then we're going to have economic problems, energy problems, environmental problems, all these crises. It means that the price of things will go up effectively to infinity, and you won't be able to afford anything, or they won't be available. And so that's the price of infinity. The Venus project, we're talking about the Phoenix model. Like, we wait until the system collapses, it hits towards infinity, and then we magically transition. And so if you're looking at a graph, it goes up and then it has to jump down. No, well, that doesn't make much sense to me. Why don't we aim to making food, water, electricity, transport, education, health, shelter, everything as free as possible? So rather than just waiting for people to culturally go, I'm happy where I am in society, I'm not going to do anything, and then it all collapses, go, no, here is this better system that we're building that's cheaper and free, and eventually the price gets to zero, and at least the necessities of life are free to everyone on the planet.
Exactly. People have access to those necessities of life.
Exactly, and that's an important key step. So we're building that technology. I mean, most of the technology exists, but it's not put together in the right way. So because we've got currently that profit-oriented perspective in capitalism, there's not a how can we feed everyone in an automated way? How can we build the best type of buildings which don't need large amounts of air conditioning because they're built better, but they're also built without large amounts of human labor needed, like, say, Earthship housing needs. So there's
even roads and things like that. Back in New Zealand, they build the roads, and then they get issued funding from the government. So they rip up those roads, and then they rebuild them again using the new funding just to keep people's jobs intact. So it's ludicrous how that's working now in the system.
Whereas you'd want not just how do we build good buildings, but how do we build an entire city in a way that doesn't require oil and cars and transport? How do you build things that people can easily bike around and walk around in, and that it's green? And what we really need right now is to maximize the amount of forested green space.
Yes.
We need, I saw a great stat. It was effectively, we need 1 trillion trees. We need to, within the next 10 years, go and grow 1 trillion trees, and that will be enough of a carbon sink and everything else to get us out of the climate crisis that we're in.
Where I am in Hanoi, we definitely need that. Last week it was rated the most polluted city, and I'm there riding around on a motorbike.
And you've got special
and I've got special face
mask
mask on, so and I'm there and I'm going, oh my goodness, they actually need more trees here, and there's lots of space for that to happen. That they
it's
need
just
more
such
trees.
a concrete jungle there. Like,
It
just,
is a concrete jungle.
Yeah,
it's
it's just concrete without the tree part of the jungle. It's
and the population is increasing immensely at the moment there, so they're building not only up, they're building out.
Yeah.
But I think trees need to be implemented there too.
And it's something that surprised me about Manila. Because I spent 7 months in Vietnam as well last year, and was amazed that they really love their smoke. They burn everything. They burn the garbage. They do all sorts. So I was there coughing. I've got a little bit of asthma, and even living out rural where there's rice paddy fields and all of that. I was still like smoked. People would just burn the garbage nearby, and I couldn't breathe properly. But I went to Manila, and it's the most densely populated city on the planet.
Yes.
And I expected just the smoke alone to be bad, but it's far less than you would expect.
Yes, I was very surprised.
Even though there is smelly jeeps and stuff, and when I run along the road or go for 12k run, still have a face mask on, but you don't need to be very far away, and it's fine because they've put all these little trees along the road and little just greenery bits all around the place. So that soaks up a lot of it.
Soaks up a lot of it. It does, and in Vietnam they're using motorbikes a lot with sub-quality oil, so that's contributing to a lot of the pollution that they have there, as well as them like burning lots of garbage, smoke, and
they just I hate the way they just smoke a cigarette in a restaurant in an air-conditioned space, and you go, where is safe? But that's culture. That's culture. Just a cultural thing.
Exactly, cultural thing. So getting back to your price to zero, what are some of the systemic problems, just for those that are wanting to...
What do you mean by systemic problems? In that's such a big... There's so many systemic problems. We've got cultural issues we just mentioned. There are major... we've talked about resource usage and how we just dispose everything rather than this book here, actually, Cradle to Cradle, is a great explanation of how we should be putting like you got a factory, you take water in. We should actually have the water inlet downstream of the water outlet.
Yes.
And what that forces you to do is, instead of just going, I'm going to take the water in, use it,
dump it,
pollute it, and then throw it out, you're actually putting filtered, better quality water out, and then the river should get cleaner, not dirtier.
Yes.
We should be treating everything like a material cycle. So we've got, we track the titanium or metals or plastics or wood or whatever, and say these have a cycle, and you build whether it's a chair or a drone or whatever it is, your cutlery. Once you've used it, then what happens with it? Well, those materials should be able to be broken apart and disassembled to their component elements, and then bits melted down or reformed into new materials and new products. We should have infinitely reusable nylon threaded clothes. So I don't want these clothes anymore. Cool, they'll be re-threaded, done. Or so that's like good quality, long lasting stuff. Or you have what I consider bionutritional stuff. So you might have clothing that's designed to last a week, and then you throw it on in the parklands, because there's signs saying please litter here because it's good for the environment.
Yes.
And
then it becomes back part of the ecosystem again.
yeah. So I guess transport's an example. You were just talking about how smelly and smoky and all of that. You could replace most of the transport with maglev trains for really long distance stuff. I mean, they can travel in an evacuated tube at over 4,000 kilometers an hour. The main issue is like the G-forces on people when you're talking, you could potentially go up to 8,000 kilometers an hour, but there's so much of a G-force, that you.
But as future knowledge comes to us, we can develop ways.
We can do with that.
Solve that problem.
So
it's about problem solving. Yeah.
But that would easily let you do a lot of delivery long distance, replace aircraft and flights and stuff. Big giant project, but the cost of transport once you do that is relatively small. It would be the equivalent of what we currently use to maybe drive 100 kilometers and you can go 3,000 kilometers.
We see now in Manila. I've been here for the past couple of days, and it's heavily densely populated, and they do have a huge traffic problem here.
Massive traffic problem. They're trying to be like Americans, and they want the big cars and the macho-ness and everything else.
The ego centric thing.
And they're very aggressive drivers. They don't care about others, and they're just going to push in. And if you're a pedestrian walking along and a car's coming, you definitely give way to them. Whereas in Australia and everywhere else I know of, those cars give way to you.
And I see here the vans that's so crammed in with people, so it's cramming everyone in like sardines.
Yeah, sardine tent. You didn't even go on a train, so those are full sardine. Yeah.
So there needs to be a more sustainable and more better way of use for transport.
Yeah, and that comes down to city design and a whole bunch of other stuff. And within, but a lot of it might be, say, you've got to go get your groceries and whatever, and it's that last mile of transport. I mean, I ordered stuff off eBay. In Australia, it arrives and it's fine. Here, been waiting 2 and a bit months, and I know that it hit the Philippines. I know it's here, but just it never arrived. The postage system just is bad. So,
and then on top of that, you got huge import taxes.
Exactly. So that last mile bit is interesting, and the way I would like to see it done is that within a house you would have a bunch of transport ducts or whatever that you could have a little robotic system that brings whatever it is that you've ordered. And so if you throw your clothes in the laundry, there might be a little shoot. It goes away, it gets washed, and it goes directly back into your cupboard. You don't have to think about that. It's done automatically, and it's done in the most water and energy efficient way needed, and whatever else. But you might be able to prioritize certain clothes to be washed faster, whatever. If you need food, then your fridge would automatically detect, you've taken out the milk or whatever, and it's getting low. Here's new milk, and it automatically give you a new carton or fill up the bottle or whatever's needed. And so that's a really intelligent home system, and it just means that you don't have to go to the shops anymore, because and this gets to that holistic systems view. If you actually just think, how do we automate the checkout checks? Would be a question someone might ask. We go to the store and how do we automate? No, you've got to zoom right out and not just say, I'm at the store, and instead of getting someone to scan stuff, I've got to scan it myself, or it's RFID. No, what you actually want is those things in your house, and the way we've solved that is by having supermarkets and places to buy things. But if you could instead order online and have it directly delivered, you now have removed an entire distribution system and replaced it with something far better, which we couldn't do before. We didn't have a way of being able to get
using that system now where you order it online, even like food. In Vietnam, you order the Grab food. So if you want,
it can come
straight to the door.
You don't need
using an app.
Now suddenly you've got an entire all these supermarkets and all these other places that you might have it. They all have regional distribution centers, and the food would just come from there. Or ideally, the food would come from vertical farms.
Yes.
Just
nearby.
Just nearby.
Yeah.
And it would just be picked fresh. Go, here's a tomato, here's an apple, whatever. Come straight to you.
And this can be set up in multiple communities, multiple places.
Yeah, but it needs a high tech, and this is the difference between. So talking about the transition now, I guess. Most people think, well, if we're going to transition, let's. And I talk about sustainable communities, but not the existing sustainable communities that most people think of, not the hippie commune thing, because they're very high labor intense.
Yeah.
What we need is actually a high tech sustainable community, an RBE aspiring community. And that requires you to have, I guess, almost a research and development think tank that is developing those systems and say, all right, how do we create a home that has a transport system built into it? So even if it just goes to the table and your stuff just gets put on the table automatically. I've seen a great little system where it's just like a little I-beam or something like that a little robot. It's just got some little clasping hands, can just move things around, and you can have multiple different tracks, and it can be quite intelligent, and you can have a whole bunch of them moving around. And
sort of like our restaurants are, like some sushi restaurants have that robot that now serves the food and comes around. You've got the tray and it comes to you and all sorts of...
Exactly. And once you've got something that you can now say, okay, it can hold various sized containers, and those containers, and I call this the Tupperware economy, where instead of getting plastics and everything's wrapped, no, you get a reusable container, and it's there. Once you've taken the product out, or it's automatically placed for you, that container goes back into the system and is reused, and if it needs to, it's washed, whatever's needed. But you would have, instead of bins, you would just put the containers somewhere, and it would get taken through into that distribution system. That means that you're not throwing away insane amounts of plastic. You might mostly be using glass containers and or really thick plastic containers, whatever is needed. Suddenly you don't have the great ocean plastic
pollution type thing. There's a few things that have come out recently where people are now using the plastic that's in oceans, they're recycling it in a more better way. In Vietnam now, they're actually doing away with plastics and replacing it with bamboo. For packaging, especially for packaging, supermarkets and that kind of thing. So they're trying to go down that way. For now. So let's. Can you give us a bit of a explaining about, or can you explain a little bit about the Phoenix model and the collapse to an RBE? Yeah. So I sort of talked a little bit about that, saying, okay, the price of infinity, everything gets so expensive, where the Phoenix model was everything gets so expensive, civilization collapses, and the underlying assumption in that is that right now people aren't motivated to change to a new system, and they're not going to be until, and here's the until is, the analogy I used was the burning building. Yeah. So if you're Yeah, I saw
You've got
that. Yeah.
You're in a building, and
There's a
we're
plank.
saying, "Hey, go across to this other building."
Yeah.
But there's this plank on,
between the
you walk
buildings.
between the two buildings. You got to
Yeah.
walk the plank, and it's somewhat dangerous. And people go, "What the hell? Like I might fall. It's dangerous. I'm happy where I am in this building. That building has nothing to offer. Why do that?" But if your building is on fire, you're now in mortal danger if you don't move. So you're going to go to the other building.
It's like the Titanic sinking,
Yeah, you're fine. You're going to stay on the Titanic, but if it's sinking, you're going to jump, even if it's into icy cold water.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. We don't want them to jump into icy cold water. We don't want the Titanic to sink. We want it to. We want to go and make. I don't know.
Until the
really
Titanic
great-
sinks, I think a lot of people are trying to arrange the deck chairs on the Titanic to try and keep the Titanic going, but eventually it will sink.
But we actually want a new, in this analogy, I guess, the Titanic, we want a new ship that they can go to.
And not rearrange the deck
rather,
chairs.
They can bring their deck chairs over to the new ship if they really want, but I mean, the RBE is, what we really want is to create such an amazing system. I mean, if you got food, water, and electricity and transport, all those necessities of life for free, I can tell you, I want to go there. So
I think a lot of people would want to go there, and they'd find they'd come up with new things to do. Their creative outlook will be a lot more open, and they'll do some of the passions that they could only do if they had A, money, or B, time.
Exactly. So just finishing off the building analogy, instead of saying you've got to walk this thin plank between the buildings and it's up 50 stories tall, instead, if that plank is on the ground and it's there's a party over there, you're going to want to go over to the other building. Let's move over to the RBE because it's an enjoyable place, a place to be. So what you were saying, there will be, and then now this is getting into the crossing the chasm type stuff, is saying that there's different groups of people, and initially we're the innovators, and we can imagine what it will be like, and we want to go and build it. And then there's the early adopters who'll jump on board because they just want to try something new. But it's not until we develop it to a point that it actually is quite good, and often probably won't be called the Zeitgeist Movement or resource-based economy. It's going to be rebranded to something else. But it will have hopefully grown to the point that there's, over 100,000 people living within some sort of RBE society, and it's starting to spread, and then the pragmatists will come on board. They're the people who want to achieve something in life, but I mean, like me right now, I would like to be working on the transition full time, but I can't because I have to go earn enough money to pay rent, to save up because we've got a baby on the way.
Yeah, we're all in survival mode, and so we have to sort out those basic needs of survival. But if those were taken care of, we would have the time to pursue those creative things that we really want to do, all those passions, whether it be family time, recreation, travel. I'd love to do more travel, and then volunteer. I did a lot of volunteering in Vietnam and Cambodia and different places, helping to educate some of the villagers, and not only with English, but about with a good outlook on life and things like that, that I really enjoyed, and I'm still doing a lot of that kind of work here. So voluntary will be a huge thing in RBE.
Will massively increase because you can. I mean, we both volunteered at Blue Sky,
that's right.
Little English center in Vietnam. You were the reason I
that was
went,
one,
so.
and it was a beautiful location, beautiful place, and a good balance of nature and doing. You could do some of your work there as well.
I was writing a sci-fi novel set in an RBE future. That's my current direction for how I hoping to help the transition, is trying to inspire more people in a different form than say PJ's films. Whilst I can do basic filmmaking, I can't make a film like he does, or I can't even make, like I said, documentary. But I'm hoping I can write a novel that will be inspiring, and got a whole bunch of other ideas of what to do afterwards.
And I'll be honest, a lot of the reason why I left New Zealand was because of those systemic problems back there, and how it is a developed country, but there's that kind of big brother thing over you. You need to get a job, pay taxes, all this other, and it didn't give me the space or creative space I needed to do what I wanted to do. So that was one of the reasons why I left New Zealand. I mean, it's a place where, yes, I was born, but now I feel a lot more happier to be doing what I'm doing, and having that creative space is what's really needed. Now, getting back to some more of those questions.
Yes.
So let's talk about the many RBE communities and how can we start those RBE.
There's already a few RBE communities. Yeah. Most people don't realize this, but there's like the Katagaya project in Peru, which that's a popular one, and it looks like they're doing reasonably well. It's still like a small sustainable community that are just getting on their feet, but they've got a 7.5 kilowatt water turbine, like a vortex turbine thing. And they seem to doing some I've seen website updates and stuff. I've never been there, but I hear that it's pretty awesome. And there's a bunch of groups that have either been trying or are in the process of starting up. So I was part of those communities, which gave it a good shot, and we had $100,000+ worth of investment, but unfortunately that tried to grow a little bit too fast, took on 80 grand worth of debt.
Wow.
When it brought a small organics shop, and then it just
the intentions were great. It was just that
all the intentions were great. It just unfortunately didn't have quite a good decision making process thing in there. So there's that, but there's the One Small Town project, Michael Tellinger's Ubuntu Planet stuff. There's ASIMPAC, which is trying to do more of a corporate type thing, and I really like the Coda Co-op concept that Juso in Finland's doing, where they want to create just these small, they're tiny houses,
right,
but in a way that when you're part of that community, then you can access anything within the community and those sorts of things. So there's a few starting, but most of the issues seems to be there's just a lack of resources. There's not enough money, there's not enough things. So my aim hopefully is to be able to write the novel that I'm planning to, and then get a whole bunch of hopeful crowdfunding types of where people donate a regular monthly income to the Price is Zero fund, where we can put money to those transition projects
and use kind of like a revolving funding model.
Revolving funding model. So there's kind of two main parts. Initially there's the development of something. So if you're developing a new automated food production system, then you kind of need grant money almost. It's money that will be used up to develop that new system. But then when you want to spread that to to be able to feed 7 billion people or something, you need to. That's where the revolving funding pool comes in. So we might have, say, $100,000 that we donate we give out as an interest-free loan to various places that go and build a new.
They start
that. They build a new food production facility or whatever it is that's needed. And there might be a development fee, so they we might give, maybe it costs $10,000 to set up,
Start
and
up
then there might be $2,000 or $3,000 extra once. So as they're selling that food off, some of the money is going to paying off that loan,
Right.
and then they might pay a little bit towards that development fund, and so we can develop new things, and then when we get it, that's to a point, we go
Start up
and
another one.
start scaling it out again.
So it's that revolving funding.
Yeah. Well, the great thing with the
Model.
revolving funding model is that if you put, say, $1,000 in, and the system that I've been a part of, Carina, the Citizens Owned Renewable Energy Network Australia, they're setting up solar PV installations.
Right.
So if you put enough money in to buy one solar PV panel in the first project, 10 years later, you've already funded, 4+ projects, 4 panels, because that money gets used, gets paid back, goes to another project, gets paid back, goes to another, and it keeps going along.
While building it up.
And so you keep building on, and then if people are continuously donating towards it, that funding pool grows, and so it becomes this incredibly powerful way of using money effectively. But it's limited in that it can only be used for things that will give a payback.
Yes.
You don't need to be making a profit. You just need to be making savings, and you can pay back the money from the savings that
Yes.
you're having, and then you end up with that for free. So what?
And then you start the next one. Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, that's awesome. And so you talked a little bit about the RBE aspiring communities. So can you elaborate a little bit more on?
Yeah. So the communities themselves, they're going to start small, just because we need to be developing those systems. We're not going to have, even if we had $30 million, and that's my aim, is to try and get like $30 million and set up a good, R&D think tank type thing. But you're going to start under 150 people, and you probably want to set up a few of these communities around the world, get them all talking to each other and learn, developing on different things.
Set up some systems so they can communicate and collaborate together.
Exactly. And if you're looking at, say, food production, then what you want to do is try all of a bunch of those current systems. So we've got standard field, adding extra nitrogen based normal production, but we've also got vertical farming and aquaponics and hydroponics, and there's permaculture, and there's this whole variety of other ways, and then there's automated systems for those that are a bit different, where you might have the farm bot, which is almost like this big CNC machine that goes and does stuff within an area.
Douglas Mallet was doing something like a cybernative farm.
He was trying to do the cybernated farming system, but he didn't get the funding, and was trying to do just something a bit too big for what people were able to give. So he needed a smaller prototype first, and then you can grow out
from there.
And there's some great systems already built. That's the thing, is when you go and look, there's a whole bunch of TED Talks and other videos where people have, they've already got the automated harvesting robots, which you see in the Zeitgeist films, and there's some great imaging systems for knowing exactly how are your plants doing, that identify
Drones will be
weed.
really good to use in those.
Yeah, and so I like the idea that you'd have the vertical farming model if you're talking about growing food, and because you then have hermetically sealed sections. You could even have you can control the lighting, the air quality, everything. You don't have to worry about bugs and diseases and anything else coming in. And if anything does get in, you quarantine that section, and it's great. So it's organic by default. Then
And it's sustainable because you're not using like lots and lots of land.
yeah, of course
Which
it
is-
requires a lot of resources to set up, but once it is, and especially if it's done in a nice automated way, then it's producing lots of food and you don't really have to worry about it much. And the interesting part of it, I guess, is with these RBE communities is that you're going to need different solutions according to your local resources.
Yes.
According to the environment and weather and everything else. So, I mean, of course, a building-based vertical farm doesn't make sense if you're under the sea or or in the desert or something.
Yeah.
So there's all these different requirements that will come about, and so you can't just apply a one-size-fits-all model. You have to be able. That's why I suggest you try a bunch of different things in a bunch of different places, and know what works and what doesn't, and so we end up with a few different solutions.
So there have to be an environmental analysis done on the area and
Yeah, and so when you
Something like
when
that.
you start to spread out, so once you've built, so these RBE communities initially start, and you're starting to produce excess food and electricity, and you're probably providing some intelligence service, like people doing remote work and whatever else. So so you're bringing money in, you're producing an excess of goods and services, and you're selling that off to the local monetary based societies around you, and as much as possible internally you're trying to live without money, and you have to go
and building up your system while you can. Or
yeah.
building
So
up
you and what you need to do is this iterative you build some technological systems,
yeah.
you change the culture, and then you realize that the technology systems and local infrastructure or whatever needs to change, and then so you need to actually go through this cycle a few times before you get to something that's nice and optimal,
Yeah.
before you can start to spread that out. There's some actually really good evolutionary biology type ways this works. You look at birds with longer beaks and stuff.
Right.
And so they usually what happens is the birds will go to some island somewhere, and there's a longer, it's just slightly longer than their beak shaped flower, and they start to evolve longer beaks. And then over some time, there's this evolutionary race, and then they end up with much longer beaks than they did. But they then go fly back to the mainland, and then because they've got what's now an evolutionary advantage in another, in the other environment, previously, then they spread. In the RBE context, what versus capitalism, corporations in capitalism are all fighting. They're all competitive.
Yeah.
And now, great
Because of
example,
things like perceived scarcity and
the profit motive and all of those other things there, and so you're gonna have patent rights, and there's all sorts of things where you go like, here's this great thing, why doesn't that exist in this other environment? Oh, because someone patented it. And if you were to take the example of chickens, those chickens that are competitive might be bigger chickens, and they're dominant and they're fighting each other, though, and as they're fighting each other, they're injuring each other. Now you take a big competitive chicken and they attack a small collaborative chicken. The collaborative chickens, they're all working together, and individually they might not be as powerful. So when you just go 1 versus 1, you see, the big chicken just dominates. But when you talk about a group of competitive and a group of collaborative, that collaborative group is much more powerful than that group of competitive. 10 competitive, they're all fighting each other, and then, we'll go fight the collaborative. No, the collaborative ones working together are far better.
Yes.
So that's...
I saw talk about that, about collaboration and competition. Alfie Coyne, he had a good talk about that. And
there's a great YouTube video that I often... survival of the fittest, but not quite.
Yeah.
And anyway, so I hope that would be part of that evolutionary part. So those RBE communities kind of need to be isolated from the in a way, so that they can do that evolutionary process change. You kind of got to shed a lot of the existing ways that capitalism forces us to think, develop those RBE things, because we know that the culture is going to be very different in an access abundance scenario, and post scarcity society. You've got to think very differently, and it's going to be hard. We don't even know really what it's like, because we haven't had a chance to really live in that type of scenario. But once we develop those, then we can start working out how to get other people to live like that as well. The issue is time. I think there's a fixed amount of time, and it's like that saying, one woman creates a baby in 9 months. 9 women create 9 babies in 9 months. You can't get them to make one baby in one. Baby in 1 month. So. We want a bunch of RBE communities, and they're all going through that process, and they're going to come up with different solutions and hopefully work together. And some may fail, and some may thrive, and there'll be a bunch of different issues. There's a big scaling issue as well, where once you get 100 above... Actually, once you get above 75 people, it's hard to use the standard consensus model, saying, here's this issue, what do we all want to do? And everyone has to learn what that problem is and what the possible solutions are, and then everyone talks about how to solve that. It's very time intensive, and once you get above that sort of 75-ish, it's hard. Once you get above 150 people, the issue is Dunbar's number, and that's saying, I know everyone in the community and at least sort of what they know. So I know that you're good at vlogging, and I'm good at web development, and so we've got that, and I know Cliff and Polina and all these other people and where their skills are. But when you're looking at 10,000 people, it's really hard to do that. So you now need a whole bunch of different decision-making systems and
elements that need to be set up.
Yeah. There's some great systems already around, Lumio and whatever else, but I think within an RBE we're going to need to have a fine-tuned, better setup for that.
Let's talk about micronations a little bit. Like in Europe, there's some, and others around the world now.
I mean, there's a whole bunch of micronations in Australia and in Europe, and there's less than 100 around the world. So the micronation is you've got a country. And then within that, a great example is the Hutt River Province in Australia, or Sealand. It's a piece of land that someone manages to get declared as its own little
like
nation,
a
sovereign state within that country. And in doing so, you now, they can have their own money or postage system and whatever else, and
sort of like the Vatican. Vatican's like a sovereign nation.
Yeah, that's actually...
Even the Queen goes there, and she has to go in like ordinary civilian clothes.
Yeah. So, using a micronation setup, you now get to have that control over the laws and things, because we're going to want to be doing lots of prototyping, to the point we're definitely going to be breaking a whole bunch of building laws. One of the issues with Earth communities was we still had to pay people, even if we didn't want to, and we wanted to get rid of money. There was just that minimum requirement. Yes. There's all of these laws that that are great within that standard country context, but you don't want that. You don't want to. You can't just go get another country. So a micronation is a way of like a prototype.
A place for a prototype.
Yeah, and then it might make it harder to spread some things out, but where free food, but only in here because you have to sell it outside of that micronation or something. But once people start to see what's going on, you'd hope that starts to spread.
And it can catch on.
Yeah.
Okay, so I do want to look at talking a little bit more about the current system, more to do with now the increase of artificial intelligence being utilized in different parts of the system. In social media, it's been utilized to what they call fairness for people posting up different information, and it's been used in a way that I think is, from my point of view, quite abusive. So I think it's going to ramp up a lot more now, and there are going to be people that are going to be affected, from creative people who have a lot of their monetized things on these social media platforms, and a lot of them are already feeling the pinch with artificial intelligence being used by the so-called Silicon Valley bigwigs.
What you're alluding to there is much more about the filtering algorithms that are used by Facebook and YouTube and the like, because there is years worth of content being uploaded every day. It's an insane amount of stuff, and so and there is even artificial intelligence robots being used to create new content.
Yes.
And pump YouTube and like full of new content, but so now we've got this issue of sorting through what's good and what is it that you want. But what we have is these social media systems that they're funded by advertising.
Yes.
What they want is you to be looking at lots of content, even if it's not good for you. So there's now this bias, intentionally or not, towards what will get you to look at a lot of stuff and then be able to look at lots of advertising, and what's advertising friendly content and whatever else. And was it you?
One of my friends, they come across some bit of social media, what do you call it, shadow banning, which is the term where if you have a page, they can basically stop your reach to your audience unless you do this or unless you do that. Basically turn the tap down.
Right down to the tiniest little drop.
Trickle. So it's that kind of thing that's happening. I just wanted to talk a little bit more about that artificial intelligence and lead more into how artificial intelligence will be used in a RBE. Yeah. So right now, I'm a computer programmer, and I can most algorithms you just got a bunch of maths. You get it down to numbers, and you say, okay, how long is this, or what are the statistics around this, and then you can make some decisions. Whereas most of the AI that's being used is a neural network. They give a whole lot of data, hundreds of gigabytes of data, saying, here's these videos, here's all of this information about watch time. When do people watch? How much? What are the sections they do and don't watch? And what do they go and watch next? And what do they enjoy? Yes.
And it builds up these predictive models and says, based on all of this information, I think that people are going to want to watch this next or that next. And so you've now got both the corporate biases and also human biases involved, and we've got these weird human biases.
Yes.
It's crazy just how bad human brains are. When people like, God made us, in his own self-image, then God's really fucked. I didn't mean. And let's not make AI in our own self-image, because we're going to make some really fucked up AI.
Well, Ray Kurzweil says differently, doesn't he? He says that we will become the gods when we...
Well, yeah, this is where the book Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari is really great. He talks about dataism, and there's a whole other... could do another podcast just on dataism, but anyway. The thing with AI, and I think I'll take the perspective of what the bad AI, what could go wrong. So you've got super intelligent AI, and so this is Nick Bostrom's book on superintelligence, and he explains, okay, so let's, rather than the current basic AI, let's say we've got something that gains in consciousness, uses itself to it very quickly goes up the intelligence ladder to being 100 million times more intelligent than all of the humans on the planet. And so, but there's three forms of it. You've got the Oracle AI, which is effectively a Google type thing where you can ask it questions and it'll give you information. So, how do I build a doomsday weapon? It would be a bad thing.
What do I need?
Or how do I get to an RBE? And so it can tell you that, and it can understand and predict humans in incredible fashion or whatever else. But there's the genie, and I call it, so you've got a good genie and an evil genie, and most people you want to talk about the evil genie problem. So that is where you ask it, make me paper clips. And so it uses its intelligence to make just paper clips. You didn't specify a number, so it decided in as many as it possibly can, and it converts all of the matter that it can get hold of into paper clips. So all the humans, all of the organic matter, the entire Earth. And then it send out these drones and spaceships or whatever, and go, and at close to light speed, there is just the entire universe being converted into paper clips. So that's the evil genie problem. And then there's the Sultan, which would be, it goes and controls humanity and influences, whether Illuminati style or whatever, whether it's dictatorial or whether it's hidden behind the scenes, it'd still be a sultan. You've actually got benevolent dictator, a really good dictator that says, look, humans are, we've got all these weird biases, how we perceive money and resources, and we're evolutionarily biased to be very sensitive to loss aversion. We'd prefer not, we would go through more effort to not lose something than we could to gain twice as much of it. There's all sorts of weird things. And we're in a situation where we're destroying the planet and we're resource overshoot and everything else. We could have an AI that actually controls our resources and controls a whole bunch of things in a benevolent way, and ensures that we actually end up thriving.
That serves humanity for the purposes of...
It's what we need, not what we want. Because it's about what we actually need to have, but not what I want this. Because what we want has all of that evolutionary baggage behind it. I want is to eat a lot, or to fuck a lot or whatever. But you can get diseases, die, all sorts of things that actually let's go and fix things up a bit. So I do see that AI has incredible potential, and I think that we are definitely heading towards that way. And the resource, I briefly talk about the RBE and the resource. Yes. Some people call it resource engine or the resource distribution system, because this is talked about in Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari, and one of the key reasons people think US one event versus Russia, and this is the capitalism versus communism part, was actually the state-run way that communism was set up was based around a small number of people getting all this information, and they're trying to process it, they're trying to make the decisions, they're trying to say, how many loaves of bread should these different stores make? Now, so that's a limited number of processing nodes that are making these decisions. Capitalism distributed that decision-making intelligence and said, well, each of those store owners work out what they should and shouldn't do, and then they can adjust on a daily basis according to what they think the needs are and everything else. So that's why you would have these major long lines and not enough food in Russia, because they weren't very good at getting the resource allocation right. But now we've got an issue, we've got such an overabundance of production, but it's wasted and not very useful. So we actually need to go, in a way, back to a centralized way, but in that the decision-making processes aren't being made by lots of different people, but they're being made by an intelligent system based on all of that data. So fast feedback loops like we've got, but with what I would hope would be, say, like a 5th generation distributed ledger. So distributed ledger is the underlying technology to crypto, and Bitcoin, whatever you want to say. But in the current, like Bitcoin was 1st generation and incredibly energy inefficient and has some major problems with it and just can't scale either to what we need. And then there's things like Ethereum, which you might consider Gen 2, and then Hashgraph would be, say, Generation 3. You might consider that there's some other technology you could almost consider another. But Hashgraph is has this great ability to scale and could be what we need almost. Let's say 2 more generations of crypto later, we could have a system where when it comes to ordering things online or whatever you need, and say, oh, okay, that arrives here. Where does it come from? Where is that picked right now, or do you get some old stuff? Or like if you've got food in the fridge and it's getting a little bit old, then that is automatically allocated to somewhere else, and say, look, someone's doing a big cook somewhere else. There's a kitchen, and so it's moved over to there. All of those little things can be done in an automated way, but you can't make the decision, and your fridge could ping and say, hey, this is getting old, but you need a different system that can actually do all of that resource routing. And so what's good about a distributed ledger type system is that anyone can access the records and say, what has been allocated, what is being got, how is this working, and so you can run a little note, you can see exactly what's going on, and it should be at least semi-transparent or fully transparent, in that you should be able to see what the algorithm making those decisions is. So initially you might just have someone initially the filtering stuff, you just have someone writing some code, but now you might get to the point that you need to do forward simulation, and you need to understand these complex patterns where it's, we're going to have an influx of people every time for Christmas or whatever, and we need to have all this extra tofurkey ready or whatever it is, and that would be hard to predict just based on last week's trends, but 10-year trends it would come up, and there's all of this sort of stuff. So now that's where I consider it semi-transparent, in that you wouldn't really know, because it's hard for it to know what the the exact weighting of everything was to make that decision. But you could run simulations. You'd know what information it used and what the outcome was, and you could have a rough idea of how it made that decision.
Yes.
And now people, instead of talking about politics, instead of talking about, who do we vote for? No, how do we improve this algorithm? And how do we make algorithms that can be culturally appropriate? So you might have a city that's completely filled with vegans, and another with vegetarians, and another with high-tech people, another with low-tech people, and they've all got these cultural differences. And they're all going to want different resources in different ways. And so now you get they'll try and optimize their local parts, and then that has to still feed into the global grid. And so people would go, okay, well, you doing a bunch of computer science stuff, or you probably have a whole big multidisciplinary approach. Hey, we found something, and we've taken a simulation of all of the existing ways that resource allocation was done, and we noticed that there's these edge cases. We've now been able to fix those edge cases where you had to wait 20 minutes for an automated taxi car to arrive and pick you up, or whatever it was. Now we've got something that's better than this, and we can run this simulation. We can show that it would be better based on old stuff and how we expect it to be, and run all these unit tests and everything else, and so that would be replacing all of the resource allocation stuff and all the politics and everything else.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing I was alluding to, and more about the transparency, whereas now it's not very transparency in how AI is being used. And
we could do that right now. You could select different algorithms and different filters. You should be able to do that yourself. You should be able to say, I just want to see, I've got 5 minutes on Facebook, just show me the basics. Or, hey, I want to see humorous stuff, or I want to see, catch up with what people's milestones, how many people have babies and wedding and whatever else. You should be able to filter those things yourself rather than Facebook just automatically filtering it.
Yeah.
And you should be able to switch it and show the opposite and say, show me the stuff you don't normally show me. Show me stuff from, I've got a very, left-leaning bias because of all my friends and because of all what I normally show interest in. Show me stuff from the other side.
Yeah, and I think
get me out of that filter bubble.
And that's what I think I was talking about too, was about how those AI that AI technology is used in this term they call fairness. So what the big companies perceive as fair, and what information you put out there could be different, and so your information then gets censored, or you get censored from talking about that information. So I think that's what I'm alluding to, whereas in a resource-based economy, I think would welcome all sorts of collaboration.
There's one thing we're almost touching on, and I guess I'll cover it, is tolerance.
Right.
And there's this, Karl Popper talks about the contradiction of tolerance, in that you have to not tolerate the intolerant. So in talking about the filter system, what to show and what not, there is this current rising increase in racism and Nazism,
censorship as well, coupled with censorship that's coming out.
Now, often those people who are incredibly good for the racist Nazi type thing, they're saying they don't tolerate other people who aren't Aryan race, aren't white people. I have I don't notice, you got brown skin, I guess, whatever, I don't know, I don't care. Does not make a difference, does not, to me, indicate anything about your intelligence, anything about you it just tells me, oh, you're from somewhere that had a bit more sun. That's all it.
Yeah.
All it means. And if you were to spend time in Antarctica, you might have to take some extra vitamin D tablets because you're not able to get as much vitamin D from the sunlight because it's so little there. That's cod liver oil up in the Arctic areas that was required for people to not, in order to survive up there. That's it. That's the only thing. But people think of it as a way that it somehow affects all of these other attributes in your life.
I call it the label consciousness, where people think they're this label. They think that they're this color. They think that they're colored, so they can be played off against one another. So it can be played off for profit. Which is what some of the big media companies are doing now. So they're putting articles out a lot about that kind of racism thing, but it's label versus label. And getting back to what you said, your consciousness isn't about that
Just
color.
don't. Yeah.
I think a lot of it comes back to people about who they really are, what they really are, and that these labels are just, from my experience, it's just an experience here. It's just an experience, and not to fall into the traps of the label versus label mentality and consciousness, which is what is happening a lot now currently around social media and everything like that. I guess.
Yeah, but going to the paradox of tolerance is that you must not tolerate the intolerant. So these racist people or whatever, they're saying, we will not tolerate you, or because you're like this. And as people who I will tolerate everyone, it's fine. No, if you tolerate the intolerant, then they can actually overpower that, and then then that intolerance becomes the default.
Yeah.
And this is something that we're seeing, just looking at U.S. presidential politicians, presidents. You're looking at Obama, and the tolerance had expanded because they had a black president. Yeah. And now Trump's come in, and now you see this intolerance, this wave of racism and everything else, and he's fueling that, and he's using it to his own uses as well. And you can definitely tell that I don't agree with it. Now, I don't think that who the president is changes much about how many drone strikes there are in Middle Eastern countries or a whole bunch of other stuff that's organized by other people. But culturally, that figurehead has an effect on the on people, and so that you can see what's happening. And so
he's a point of attention. I see he's a point of attention. Our media use him as a point of attention for the masses to view that point of attention. And so you get a lot of biases about him and things surrounding him, where it was completely different with Obama. So you're right, the toleration was a lot more with Obama, but now it's becoming more intolerant. So he's
built a wall, and there's a great article I just read the other day that the Mexicans are stealing the wall.
Yes, I saw that too. So.
Yeah, they're stealing the concertina wire from the wall that already exists.
And some are building swings between each other, and like you got American on this side on a seesaw, and you got the Mexican on the other side on the seesaw. So it's
crazy stuff. So it's not Mexicans are going to pay for the wall or build the wall. No, they're stealing the wall because they need the protection themselves around their own buildings. Interesting,
interesting, yeah.
But going back to the filtering, there will be these interesting philosophical dilemmas. Okay, who do you filter out and who do you suppress? Because if you, in an RBE, you can't actually just go, we accept everyone. We want tolerance to be the default, and so we actually may have to censor the intolerant. And there's other thoughts around so violence, And so how non-violent is it? So if you're there looking out at village or you're looking over all of these apartments and you see that someone's being domestic abuse. They're being the partner's bashing up the wife. Standard scenario. It happens a lot, unfortunately. And my girlfriend, her previous partner, there was a lot of domestic abuse. Yeah. So should you intervene? Because if you intervene, you are going to have to use violence in a way, or force at least, to try and suppress that.
Yeah.
But that's using force, and the answer is, well, yes, you're reducing the amount of violence there is, and we want, in an RBE, violence to head towards zero. It's not going to get completely to zero, but it's going to drop dramatically when we don't have all of these reasons that we're fighting each other. We're not in a zero-sum game where I have
competition is self-interest will become social interest. So these those things that are
So these are the interesting things that we're going to have to grapple with, and we've got all of these other new problems that we're going to have to deal with in an RBE. It's not going to be easy. But by default, we won't need massive police and military and everything else. Was it possession is 9/10 of the law? Well, that means that 9/10 of the law can disappear because
exactly
it's And okay, if someone, let's say I get a worm in my brain or I have a lesion or whatever goes on, and I get very violent, I would want someone to suppress, to taser me, whatever, to sedate me, to go and fix me up,
find the problem,
and fix so that I'm not going to be violent. I don't want to be violent to others, and if I'm being violent for whatever reason, then it might just be an emotional reaction because of a whole bunch of different. I'm really tired and then I was and then I was embarrassed, and then I stubbed my toe, and then I thought someone punched me in the arm, but they was like, hey, jolly good, and I'd been drugged or whatever, and suddenly I got violent. Like, no, suppress that person, so that they then can reduce that violence, and this gets to an interesting point, and there's a great TED talk on treating violence like a contagious disease.
Yeah.
So when you think, okay, well, if I'm violent, then other people might be violent, and you start applying this on a large scale. You say, you actually start to see these crazy trends where it's like, oh, 9/11. Well, if you look at go back through history, you see that Russia tried to invade Afghanistan. America put billions of dollars into Afghanistan through Pakistan, so they fully armed Afghanistan and got CIA trained. When they say CIA trained Taliban, that they're talking about the fact that they armed up the Afghani people to fight against Russia. So, of course, they didn't even really know that they were being, helped by America so much. They thought it was half America and half Saudi Arabia in income mostly that was funding this. But that was, from a violence perspective, you were adding a whole lot of violence to that, and then there's some splashback, and it hits America in the form of 9/11, and then America goes and tries to stomp and stomp and stomp. But what they're doing is they're spreading more violence. If this is an open oozing wound with and they're just spreading it all.
And there's been a
place.
lot of violence over the history.
Yeah.
From the wars to all sorts.
Israel and Palestine, all of that conflict. World War II. After World War II, they went, oh, here, Jews, we feel sorry for you. Here's a part of, and then here, this other country with the existing people, we're going to allocate some of it to you, and then that allocation has increased, and
then there was the Vietnam War and
all of that. And if we worked collaboratively together, you could, if you took the $1 trillion a year that the US put into military defense and nuclear weapons and everything else,
that are using big funds for war and defense.
Yeah, if you put that kind of, the US could have gone and created so much renewable energy that they would be able to export energy to the Middle East. You know, like
could solve a lot of the problems.
I mean, they don't really need it. They've got plenty of oil, but that you know, like you wouldn't have the fight over the remaining oil supplies because you would have such a vast amount of renewable energy. So that's a mindset change.
Yeah,
we've got the resources, and we've already hit global peak oil. There's an interesting point about the global financial crisis. 2008 GFC. It's believed that 6 months earlier we actually hit global peak oil. Maybe it was considered a year. And so that all those subprime mortgages, the question is, why couldn't people suddenly not be paying them off anymore? Well, it's because the price of things went up, and the price of things went up because the price of oil went up. And that's the bit that most people miss. They just see that people stopped paying, but they don't say, why did people stop paying for those? Yes, there were bad deals, but they would have been fine until this thing happened.
Looking back at the root causes there, creating a lot of those problems in the global financial crisis. I've been looking at some of the patterns, and some others believe there could be another one on the cards coming.
Yeah, definitely. Capitalism has these waves, these oscillation waves. So it could be another financial crisis like before, but could also be hyperinflation. I mean, the US is going to do what they can to stop hyperinflation, but with someone like Trump in control, and with Brexit and all these other things, there's this disintegration that stop the ability for the rallying that could occur that might prevent some of. Now, if the US dollar goes through hyperinflation and goes from right now Australian to US dollar, that's like 70 cents to the dollar. If suddenly the US dollar, $1 is now it's $1,000 to get the same purchasing power. It goes up by 1,000-fold. During hyperinflation, that would happen within a month, and then there would be 3 more months, and it might be to up to $10,000. Because so much of the rest of the world bases themselves on the US dollar, this would just cause major economic shocks.
It would, yeah.
And that's where some people who are doing well for themselves, they don't just put money in savings
in one basket
into a bank. They buy things like gold and silver and what else, with the hope that if something like that happens, then say gold or other resources will still be worth the same amount. It won't suddenly be worthless. You still want that, but the important thing is that you've got enough good cutlery and cooking. You don't have to suddenly go buy lots of things because you won't be able to afford anything. You'll be able to afford to drive. So, that's a potential that a bunch of friends of mine who are much more up on the finance side talk about. But either way, whether it's inflation or deflation or just collapse of like the GFC kind, I still don't think we're close to a full global collapse. I don't think it's just going to collapse, and that's the other thing. We're not just suddenly go, oh, there's no everything just stops. It's like, no, it's going to be that slow collapse that happens where you've just got this system that is so hungry for staying alive, wanting more. So that goes back to the Phoenix model we were talking about, saying, well, okay, let's pretend we're going to try rising out of the ashes of capitalism. Well, what are you going to do? Let's say we have this big giant tank of petrol so that we can run these systems, and we've got these other resources. Capitalism will do what it can to extract that from you, even if it means it can only last an extra day. It will go and bring the military in and destroy you and get those resources, and you're not going to have that. Whereas the price of zero transition, where it doesn't need it anymore.
And I think the more that the system squeezes people are going to respond, and we're seeing that now, like in Hong Kong with a lot of protests happening there, and then you've got...
And that's just cultural pressure. That's not resource issues.
And then there's the ones back in like New Zealand where we've got a place called Ihumatao, which is some sacred land that's been brought up by the corporatocracy. They want to buy it up, and they're doing underhanded deals and things. And then you've got the other ones in Hawaii. So there's little things like that people are feeling pressured, and they're reacting. Could be a global reaction if things get squeezed a bit more, and I don't know what the outcome will be.
So this kind of brings to Arab Spring uprising, and there was a bunch of countries that all had a revolution. Now, Dictator's Handbook and a bunch of other things show what actually happens is that you've got the military, and they're part of the keys of power. Like if you're running a country, then you've got a few people that you want to give as much resources and attention to as you can. You're effectively, whether bribing or providing to those keys of power. So the military, the people running the treasury, and that sort of thing. Whereas education doesn't matter nearly as much, and especially this is more focused within a dictatorship, so it's more visible, but it still happens within democracy, and that's why we get weird taxation rules and everything else. But there's this great formula that's civil unrest mixed with a lack of food. If you are bad at running a country to the point that people are hungry, that's when you end up getting an actual revolution, and you
revolt.
A revolt. So
or evolution.
Actually, it's just revolution. Usually it's just a new person in power, and the military and other people let someone else take the reins, and hope that and usually try and ensure that the right person comes into power, that
the right face comes
that
in.
will help them and benefit them. So we have a lot of activists who want to have this revolution and go, we'll just go, if these people were making the bad decisions and they're in power, we'll go in and replace them.
Take them out.
But the rules for rulers states that you want those keys to the kingdom, and you want to minimize as many keys as there are. So these key influential people, and that process means that, and if you can't keep them satisfied, then they will replace you. And there's a zero rule, which is that if you have no power, you can't change anything. The issue is that being on the throne, and this is the sentence or quote about absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yes.
It's because you're put in that position of power, in order to keep that power, you need to appease these people, and by doing that, I go to appease the treasury and the people. If it's a voting system, the people who vote for me, or if it's a dictatorship and the people who just keep it going. That's where I think the evolution to maybe benevolent dictatorship of an AI, or simply a better resource distribution algorithm. Like, I don't know the full best answer to the rules for rulers, and this is something I want more people to talk about and say, well, how do we deal with this? How if this is the case, then what is the best system to have?
I think looking at, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the AI, looking at the use of AI, it looks like we could be going towards that kind of benevolent type AI super ruler, where people, instead of, will have these connections with gods of such, will be more like, I think, praising a super intelligent AI. I mean, people are doing that now. You go onto a train and people are just locked and gridded into their phone and locked into the internet, because the internet's this central pillar of society now. I think the AI that would be integrated there, or would be so-called looked upon as a could be looked upon as a god of such. Having all knowledge, having all access to things, and us integrating with it. But my fear of it being used in a monetary-based system, not in a transparent way, is
that's where it's and that's where a lot of things get worrying, is when you apply the profit motive and competition. And like the current system, the way I talk about it was you've got pure science, like E equals MC squared, and working that out. Now, the application of that can be going and learning the age of the sun and how the stars work and all sorts of, and you get nuclear physics, and we could have nuclear fusion, but instead we went for nuclear fission, we went for bombs, we went for nuclear bombs. We now have the ability to nuke all of the planet many times over, and we still have 30,000 nukes on the planet. Maybe it's not 40,000 like we had a few decades ago, but it's still too much.
Nanotechnology, it's going to be even more.
And now we're developing new systems, new ways where they can have super viruses and bacterial agents, and then we'll have nanotechnology issues, and then once we start integrating with computers, and we can have computer viruses that can affect people, and there's all of these new ways that
robotic police.
So there's all of these other ways that things can go wrong, but you can't just say, oh, genetic engineering, it's bad. No genetic engineering. You're like, well. No, I mean, genetic engineering can elevate people out of the current, evolution. We can shed that evolutionary baggage that stops us being the best version of ourselves. But then you can go you can potentially go too far, or it can definitely be used in malicious ways
and being
abused, and it's the issue is that in our current society we tend towards the abuse, but we don't have to, and that's what I think is so great with the RBE, and that's where I think if we want to get to a type 2 civilization, so this is the Kardashev scale, and so type 1 civilization is a civilization that's properly utilizing all the resources of the planet. Type 2 is of the solar system, and type 3 is of the galaxy. Type 4 would be of the universe. Now we're about type 0.7.
Yeah, something like we're still in the zero civilization at this stage.
And there's suggestions that it's probably very hard to become a type 2 civilization because we've evolved from there was 1,000 humans that survived coming out of Africa as the ice age came through, and so we had to do this long trip, and being able to survive multiple ice ages and everything else, we would have major hunger and scarcity, but at the same time we also evolved in places that there was lots of food that was, say, rich in vitamin C. Now, cats and dogs and other animals can create their own vitamin C from the food that they eat. The food that we eat, meat or rice or vegetarian food, we could be able to create vitamin C from that, but there's some genetic bits that got broken. And we didn't have evolutionary pressure that killed those people off because we're all eating a lot of vitamin C back as a hunter-gatherer or early hominid species. So there's a lot of these weird little things where we could be much better and could be not like. My girlfriend's pregnant and she's got to take calcium supplements in the morning.
Right.
And you need to have vitamin C with that because you need vitamin C and calcium together to absorb it properly. But as you get older, you don't absorb the calcium as well. Later in the night, she has the iron supplements and needs to make sure that she's going out during the day to get vitamin D because you need vitamin D to better absorb iron. But you can't have the calcium supplement and the iron supplement at the same time because they then clash.
Kind of absorb one another.
The calcium prevents the absorption of the iron. And this is just all this weird evolutionary baggage that we've accumulated. And so the idea of like one multivitamin that fixes you, no, you can't actually do that. When you look at them, they don't work very effectively and just end up with very expensive pee because you're peeing out most of the unused vitamins. So I'd like to definitely want to see a lot of that fixed up, and I've got bad knees, and girlfriend's they've got potential congenital heart defect, and there's so many different things that we could fix, and that should just be. I'm expecting in 50 years' time it'll be standard that you just. Like I have an injection and a retrovirus goes and rewrites your DNA, or you're just born having had that already fixed up and it's just no longer a problem.
Now they've got AI that can detect your heart signature of your heart, so it'll know who that is associated to. So instead of reading your name and that, it'll look at your heart, so you can see your heart. Oh, that's Michael. That's Wiri. That's
wow. I mean, I've got a heart rate monitor built into my watch, and that works well.
Right.
And so it's just reads my heart rate, so
we've got all the holdables, now we've got wearables.
Wearable.
The next stage will be insertables. So I think that's.
So I take this out when I go running. It's got GPS and everything built in, but in 50 years' time, having a wristwatch will be like more powerful than all the computers within a few kilometers of here.
A wristwatch in 50 years will be primitive. It'll be.
No, I think it would either be so powerful because how much electronics, or it would be if I wore this wristwatch, it would be so primitive. It's like one of those auto wind up watches.
So are there any future plans with what you're doing around RBE transition?
So like most of us Zeitgeisters, we're trying to do what we can within the monetary system, but to optimize our life around trying to bring about the transition and everything else, and that change. So right now I'm in just trying to get my savings back. A big lot of traveling last year, and I blew through my savings, went into credit card debt, and then at the start of this year I sold everything off, moved here to Manila to be with my girlfriend, and now we've got a baby on the way, and I'm just trying to get some savings back up.
Building your base.
Building base, settling down a little bit. And then the aim is that next year, hopefully a little baby boy, Xavier, will be born in January, and I want to spend 3+ months off work,
Right.
helping raise him, but also working on my novel.
Great.
So I've got.
What's your novel about? Like you.
So it's currently called The Book of New Eden, Eli's Story. Internally, I call it Book 14 of New Eden. So it's explained in the book. Anyway, it's set 50 years in the future in an RBE society. Except it starts with the protagonist, Eli,
Right.
living in one of the last remaining monetary cities. It's a bit like North Korea. It's a
Right.
full lockdown dictatorship. They actually believe that they're in a
Kind of like
a
Hunger
post-apocalypse.
Games society. Type.
Well, they think that they're in a post-apocalyptic world
Right.
where
Okay.
because the city to the north of them was nuked, but actually most of the parents know what went on,
kind of a dystopia.
but they just go with it,
Yeah.
and there's a very controlling
Hierarchy.
mayor of the city, and he actually uses a whole bunch of advanced technologies that he's got from the RBE to control people. So neural implants in the brain, and
Yeah.
he can control other
Those
people, and
that,
he has like I call them the red eyes, that people who go around and they have to kill someone every day.
Right.
That's
The
that is-
quota. They get a quota.
There's a quota. They have to kill someone every day,
Right.
and that's it. It's like this urge. Almost.
Sounds
So-
real interesting.
So there's a whole bunch of little
Could
religious
see a
parts
movie
and all
come
that.
from it too, maybe.
Potentially. So Eli escapes, he just manages to run like 30 days, and hundreds of kilometers later he ends up getting to the RBE, and there's this maglev train thing that goes past, and what the hell is going, and then
Paradise. Yeah.
well, actually, he dies. He nearly dies of radiation poisoning, and
right.
there's a radiation alert that gets triggered into people. Send some drones and give him some emergency injections. He gets taken to hospital, and a week later he wakes up, and they're flushing his system with nanobots and turned up
Right.
his metabolism, and then they're like, hey, do you want to be upgraded to this advanced human? And all of, he's freaking out, going, what the hell, and what's going on? And I thought there was aliens maybe, or what, I don't know how, who, what.
What planet is this?
And how do I afford it all? I don't understand. And so he's got to learn how to live within an RBE.
That's awesome.
So I talk about the Tao of RBE, the main
Right.
rules, about being focused on responsibility.
Right.
So it's as from a personal perspective, you go, well, if you're getting rid of money is our way that we sort of exchange. But we've got this like credit tally system that we've got in our head, and we go, hey, how are you doing? Well, you could use a bunch of different ways, and one is Wolfie, or there's the Black Mirror episode Swan Dive, I think, where it's all about how well you like others, and
Right.
it's just this rating system. Oh, I'll give you 5 stars.
Right.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm down to 3 stars.
Not kind of the rating
It's
system
a
China uses.
a bit like Sesame Credit, which is worrying as well. You're around people who say bad things about China. Oh, you're no longer able to ride the bus.
Yeah, exactly.
No, what you want is just a responsibility-based system, and I say you're responsible to the systems that support you. So the ecosystem, the environment, everything else, the technical systems, the whether it's computers and internet and everything else, and the social systems.
Yes.
But you're responsible in a way that you're also responsible that it should evolve and change and get better.
And you're integrating
and
with those systems too.
Yeah, and they're all so you can pay that responsibility off by you can just help a little old lady cross the street or hold her bags or whatever, but that's helping a little lady, and maybe she's got to go up the stairs, so you help her up the stairs. You're like, well, if you're the person who went and invented the elevator, now you've just helped
millions of little old ladies up the stairs. And if you work out how to have solar technology to power it, well, now you save the environment. And if you instead have, you know, the distribution systems built into the house, then, you know, you've now stopped people having to go to the shops at all and deal with that. So these are different ways where suddenly you've got a different focus in that engineering and that development. It's actually really fun.
Yeah.
Like when we're talking about technological unemployment, saying robots will take over our jobs. We want that. We don't want to do these boring menial tasks, and that frees us from
exactly.
It lets us do more amazing things. So not having to think about cooking, or having to think about washing my clothes, or having to go and catch food, or, you know, deal with that, means that I can focus on programming or making art or
your creative uniqueness, or
going and working out how we get people to Mars. You know, that's important. So
problem solving.
It's great. Now, most people go, well, if you get rid of money, how do you motivate people? Now, we should know, and
we talked a lot about that,
Yeah, that money is an extrinsic motivator.
Yeah.
You're doing it because you need it. Now, intrinsic motivation is much more powerful, but it's powerful for those creative tasks. So, as someone who wants to develop systems, I will go and inventing the elevator, or, you know, developing technical, you know, computer systems, whatever it is actually really rewarding. You're in the flow. You're solving problems, contributing, and you've got those three main things of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. You know, autonomy, I get control over, I get to choose what it is I'm working on, when I'm working on it, who I'm working it with, all of that. Mastery is I'm getting better at my skill, and I'm working on and developing my craft. And purpose is you're doing something that really matters. It's helping humanity. So, that's important. And that's where the responsibility part comes in, and I think that's the main part of the Tower of RBE, and then there's a whole bunch of other things that come along. So trying to put that into my novel in a way that it's exciting, but it's still teaching and doing that. And I've got all these other ideas where
bits and pieces,
like different languages, and it's more emoticon based, and
awesome.
A whole bunch of other stuff.
Well, keep us updated about how that goes, and get a launch for it when it's published. And it's definitely going to take me probably another 6 months to develop and get it to the point that it, you know, can start putting it out there, and then hopefully very quickly. So aim is develop the novel, go for a big book tour around the world, US, Europe, that sort of thing. And try and get people to actually start donating money towards the Price of Zero fund we're talking about. So that revolving funding model, that means that we can then start getting those RBE communities happening. Fantastic.
Yeah. So inspire people, get some resources, let's go build it.
So they've got the book, which is going to sort of give them a bit of insight into a possible transition to from a non-fiction point of view, and then applying that to fund some of the starting points of a resource-based economy. Awesome. Yeah.
Cool. I think we're out of time, but next time I'd love to talk more about your story and just us in general and everything else.
Yeah. I know I really wanted to talk a lot about the work you've done, and you covered a lot because you went over to Germany and Australia, and you've done a few talks. So it's good that we could talk a bit more in depth about your Price to Zero talk, and
thank you very much.
Things like that, and other things that are currently going on. And thanks for the talk. It's been awesome.
Cheers. Yeah.